Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out my last week's episode 134 with Aram Diarbian, and he is a graphic design student as well as an artist. He does a lot of 3D art and modeling. He uses this I don't know if it's like this art called Blender or like the apps called Blender, and like I've tried to do some research on it, but some really cool stuff about limited space and like this digital art that it really does. Really crazy Instagram platform, growing really fast. Definitely check out his art. I have him tagged in all my stuff. And young kid, really bright future, really great stuff. So check that out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, you can check it out on YouTube. Search The Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll. And if you like to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection. Or if you got my number or Snapchat, you could text me and we'll set that stuff up. And I'm also wearing my new iteration of the podcast shirt, new merch, tie-dye. I wore, if you go to last week's episode, seamless plug, you can see the other version of the tie-dye shirt. And to get these shirts, return guests. You got to come back on the podcast, free shirts. And if you want to buy the shirt, you could buy the shirt. If you don't want to come on the podcast, you don't feel comfortable doing that. So again, hit me up and we can figure that stuff out. But for episode 135, I'm having a return guest from episode 92, Johnny Costa.
What's up, everybody?
Welcome back to the podcast, man.
Thank you for having me.
And it's been just about I think just about a year when I saw the stuff coming up on my page this week, and we had this plan a few weeks ago. You hit me up and we were talking about how you wanted to come back on the podcast and do another episode, which I love hearing because that means I created at least an environment that you enjoyed being a part of and wanted to share some more thoughts on some stuff, and we'll dive into that. So
yeah, man, this guy's smart over here. He has a lot of good ideas. So I mainly just wanted to come over here just to talk to you.
I appreciate that, and like we had great conversations too. We really and like that was like the first time we had seen each other in person in a long time.
Yeah.
So it was nice to like have that conversation. We've been chatting up for the last hour, kind of warming up. So how I like to walk into these return guest episodes is like kind of catch everybody up on what you've been up to for like the last year and like how things have been for you.
A lot has happened since our last episode. I went on a plane for the first time.
Really?
Yeah, I think in March of last year, and I've been on like 6 vacations since. So I had a good process with the fire academy and everything where I didn't go on any vacations or anything. I was pretty much locked into my work for like 3 years. And then now I finally get a chance to kind of splurge a little bit. And I might have went a little overboard, but it was good experiences. I learned a lot from traveling.
Yeah, that's good. Like traveling is so important to do. And especially like I can relate to that. Like I hadn't gone on a vacation since my island trip that was in October, as some of you guys know. That was the first vacation that I've been on since 2019 when I went to Spain. And that was like crazy for me to actually like go on a vacation again and like getting on the plane and like there's something about traveling that is so important to like the human psyche to like go explore and be adventurous. And I think there's something innate there that if we don't do, that's where like the depression, the anxiety creeps in when you're not exploring new things.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important for people to do that. Like what were some of the vacations that you were going on?
The first one I went on was with my cousin and his girlfriend to Fort Lauderdale. So quick plane ride, but first time I've ever been on a plane. My dad, strongest man I know, but he's afraid of heights. He's never been on a plane, so I didn't do much vacationing growing up as far as like flying. So it was good. The whole experience was awesome. We only went for 3 days, and then I went a month later, brought my daughter back to Fort Lauderdale.
That was probably fun. That was probably a good experience.
And then I did a cruise for my birthday to the Bahamas.
You ever been on a cruise? Is that
awesome? It was my first cruise. I went by myself.
I've never been on a cruise.
Most people said I'm crazy for going by myself, but honestly, funnest experience I've ever had in my life. Didn't have to wait on anybody. I met a whole ton of people, had a great time. And then I think a month later, went to Miami for my friend's bachelor party, which was a lot of fun.
We talked about some stuff.
Kind of fell off of my routine a little bit. after that trip, and then went to Montreal in November,
Oh,
which was
okay.
awesome.
That sounds really
Drove to
interesting.
Montreal. It's like driving to Europe. Like it's not far. It's only 5 hour drive, but it's like everybody speaks French. All the road signs, traffic signs are in French. So that was like pretty cool. Just learning their whole culture, and the food over there is amazing. So
What
I
made you
definitely
want to
want to
do
go
that?
back. I've been wanting to go to Canada just because I got my passport finally. So I'm like, easiest place to go is Canada. So we drove over there, me and my buddy, and spent a few days over there. And that was awesome. It was very cold. I'd probably go back in the summer because
Yeah.
I knew it was gonna be cold, but and the people over there, it's like a whole different lifestyle. Like I feel like here people like to flex a lot, like the nice clothes and everything. Even if they don't have a house or a car, like people are wearing like designer clothes over here and just trying to show off a lot. Over there, like all the girls are like very simple, like they don't have designer handbags or anything, but they all wear like really nice jackets because it's so fucking cold over there.
Yeah, you'd think like gotta have some nice
So
winter wear, basically.
went over there, bought a $1,700 Montclair jacket, which was
Damn.
probably the dumbest thing I've ever done.
Probably looks good though, at
It looks
least.
good. If anybody wants it, it's for sale, half off. So I've only worn it like 3 times. So
It was probably nice to buy it there though, at least. It kind of
yeah,
like
it's
part of the
cheaper.
experience. Yeah.
Everything's cheaper over there.
That's cool. I've never been to Canada though. It's something that it's definitely on my list to like go do, but I'll make sure that I don't do it during the
Yeah,
winter.
don't do it during the winter. Do it in the summertime.
I mean, it makes sense too. Obviously, you think like New Hampshire and like Maine and stuff. Like, obviously, it's northern than that, so like it would
Yeah,
make sense. It's gonna get
exactly.
cold and shit. So, yeah, I've
People
never.
don't seem to care too much about the cold over there. Like they're still riding their bikes, walking, and all that. Not a whole lot of jaywalking over there. Like they take that shit really seriously. Like me and my buddy are just crossing the street. Everybody's waiting for the signal. So that was kind of weird.
Did you feel like people gave you any like weird looks for being like American or anything like that?
They did because I think I had like my chain out and I had my Montclair on and my designer sunglasses, and people are kind of looking at me like this kid's a fucking show off. Like, and it was kind of like an eye opening experience. Like after that, I'm like there's no need to be like showing off, you know,
Yeah.
especially if you don't have it. Like,
I think that like part of exploring other countries was seeing like how other countries and cultures receive Americans.
right?
They don't
They
really
definitely
like
think
us
we're
like
show offs.
yeah, they don't really like us like that. And like I think that's something that a lot of Americans need to experience. Like we're not the center of the universe. Like there's a lot of shit going on outside of us. And you need to like travel to these places to really see that. And like when I was going to like Spain and Ireland and like traveling through countrysides, like not always in the cities, like going and seeing what's actually outside of that. And seeing like the day-to-day life and like how people live out there and like even like the slang and the way they speak. It's just so
Yeah,
interesting. And you gotta like to a degree immerse yourself in the culture a little bit. Like as uncomfortable as that could be, I think it's like worth the experience because when you come back, like you appreciate what we have here a little bit
absolutely.
more. And I think that's like the real value of travel is like, yeah, it's great to see other places. No doubt, don't get me wrong with that. But
Coming home,
coming home and experience like, wow, I do actually have it really good here in America.
no
And I
doubt.
think we've forgotten that a lot lately, especially the past like 4 or 5 years. Like, yeah, obviously there's stuff here in our country that we need to fix and need to get right. But
I think one thing, like you said, the whole culture and like language and slang, most people are bilingual. Like you go to Canada and they're speaking to you in French when you walk in the door, and they realize you're American, and they just flip a switch and now they're speaking English, and it kind of makes you feel stupid because most people here aren't bilingual. I mean, we do have a lot of people that are, but that's just one thing. Like it made me bring home to my daughter, and it's like I want to start teaching her these different things and like one word every night. Like, what word do you want to learn? What language do you want to learn it in? So I try to like kind of immerse her in like even the music, like listening to songs in like French and Portuguese, and like it's good. That stuff is like good to know.
yeah,
It, it
100%.
it opens up the connections that you have to people.
Absolutely. And I think that is something that I definitely noticed too in these other countries is like you said, most people are bilingual. Like we think of other countries or when people immigrate to the United States, when they don't speak English right away, there is a stereotype where people don't think they're that smart. but in reality, they know how they're
They know 2 whole
yeah,
languages,
that's
at
like their
least.
second language, and that's the reason they're struggling to speak it because they're not speaking in their like natural dialect.
But at
And
least they have the guts to try to speak English. I mean, they have no other choice, but some people are just scared to, like, even going to Canada, I obviously researched a few words like please, thank you, this and that. And it's kind of uncomfortable to say it because it doesn't sound perfect, but at least you're trying. And I think people appreciate that.
no,
It's
they
like,
definitely do. They appreciate when you actually like, and like I've heard like comedians like Andrew Schultz talk about that too, and they make jokes about people like in their cultures. Like they appreciate that you took the time to learn their culture.
absolutely.
So like if you go into their country or like their provinces or whatever like that, and like you're just ignorant and just like do what you do normally in America, they're gonna look at you funny and they're gonna
Even
treat you.
worse, they're gonna be like, "Oh, this guy's even more of a show off. Like he's just coming over here." The one thing they do like is our business because I mean, there you put your card into an ATM and you say I want $100. You say I want $75, and $100 is dispensed, and that's what the exchange is over there. So our $75 is $100 over there. So you can go out to eat and like have a nice fancy dinner, and you spent like $60, like on drinks and everything.
Yeah, that's like the positive of like travel for other countries is part of their like economy, and it's important for to have that and to be welcoming. Obviously, you get people who are ignorant and assholes and ruin that experience of like for ruin the experience from the countryside of seeing what Americans are like, but like that's not like the actual depiction of what Americans are. You just get the bougie traveler
Right.
sometimes, and like that's unfortunate that that's usually their experience as someone who is kind of ignorant to their struggles and to their life. And I think it's like good to like research the places like you said you did and like Google them and like see what it's like, see what some of their history is like, because they do care. Like if you just go there and just act the way we do, it's just ignorant. And I think not enough people experience that. And obviously since COVID, now that restrictions are up and like over with for the most part, like getting back into that routine of travel is so important to really allow that. And you mentioned like teaching your daughter some of these things. That's I think it's so important because obviously at my age too, I think like I wish I stuck with something like Spanish for longer or stuck with Portuguese for
Absolutely.
something longer. Like as we get older, and this is for not just like even like languages, but just anything in general, it becomes harder to learn new things as you get older because you get stuck in your ways.
Right.
So
I was talking to a girl actually over there. My friend and I, while in Montreal, we went to a club. We waited in a line like in the snow for like an hour. Finally get in, and there's all these young like college like hipsters kind of just dancing, and they're all kind of just like keeping to themselves. And we're sitting at the bar, and then I went to get in line for the bathroom, and I start talking to this girl, beautiful girl, and I'm just chatting with her, and I'm asking about the language, like, so do they teach you like French and English like at a young age? Like, how does that work? And I think they call it primary school. I think in like first grade or so they teach English, and then after that, she basically said it's like up to you if you want to continue with the English language and research and get better at it. And she was speaking to me perfect English. You notice like some people over there had a little more broken English, but so yeah, it's definitely important. I think it's up to you to learn it. I mean, I think it's an elective, right, in high school.
yeah, yeah,
Like
it's
you
usually
do a couple of
elective.
years in Spanish, or like eighth grade is you take Spanish and Portuguese. We did at East Providence High School, and then in high school, I forget if it's mandatory, like 1 year of the language,
I think CConk we had to do like 2 years.
2 years,
Yeah,
and
and
then
then
you
if you
can
wanted
do the
to,
other
yeah,
2 years.
exactly. That's what it was
I
for
think
us.
people should, like, if you're watching this and you're in high school or you have kids, like put them through those 4 years and have them stick to a language, whether it be Spanish, Portuguese.
I think that's so important, especially with like what we're talking about in like our country is like diversifying things and having diversity in like the workplace and then schools and all these different things and like in relationships. Um,
The diversification's there, whether you want it or not.
yeah,
So
so
you might as well have the connections.
I think it's important too, and like learning things in different languages is only going to make you smarter because like you're going to be able to interpret things differently, and it makes you more hireable too when you look at the workforce.
Absolutely.
If you know more languages, you can talk to more people, and that's going to be way more beneficial towards whether, especially if you're in something like nursing or something like that, or like
hmm
um,
even in the fire department,
Yeah.
like there was people turning to me to speak to people in Portuguese, and I don't know much Portuguese at all. But like the way the like people looked at me like I was like a superstar because I'm like talking to this lady like a few words that I know, and it's breaking that language barrier. So it's definitely important.
Yeah, and I don't think enough people actually truly realize that. As we get older, we kind of get stuck, especially people who don't travel. Like you just like if you stay in the same place you were born, you work in the same place you were raised, you never really leave.
Which is what I did.
Yeah, and I mean,
And same with you, I think, right?
I started
Lived in
traveling.
Seekonk your whole life.
Yes, lived in Seacock my whole life. I think I did. The first plane I went on was like to Disney, like Florida, like classic New England is like the first place you really ever go to is like Florida.
Yeah, 3 hour flight.
Yeah, it's easy. I
Go be
mean,
on the beach in a tropical climate.
yeah, I mean, I also understand too from the parent aspect. You don't want to be on a plane with like your kids for hours and hours and hours too.
It's
Like,
expensive too.
yeah, nowadays too, it's really
Very
expensive.
expensive to travel.
How has things been with like raising your daughter and like obviously over this last year, just going through another year of life?
It's been awesome. We had a lot of fun. We've actually been to Florida twice now, which is awesome. So she's already so spoiled, which is awesome. That's how it should be. And so she was supposed to be in kindergarten last year, but she's actually starting because she has a late birthday, so
Mhm.
it's kind of like right on the border. So it's been tough being home with her all the time. She definitely wants that social interaction. So we're fortunate to have a lot of cousins that are her age. So been trying to do that. It's tough as an only child.
Yeah, how like with like the spring coming up, I know you used to have her in like softball or was it baseball, softball?
She was in t-ball and now
You're gonna continue with that
gymnastics. Because
gymnastics.
t-ball was tough. A lot of practices like right after school.
Mm.
Like so that was tough. But now we're locked into gymnastics, and she's having a lot of fun with that. Staying like fit at a very young age, like learning, just trying to teach her like what's really important in life.
Yeah, and I think that goes hand in hand with stuff that I've talked about on the podcast. Is like things that were beneficial to me was being involved in like sports and stuff like that. To not even like the physical aspect, but like to socialize too, and like have that like dynamic where obviously when she has like a coach or instructor that's teaching her how to do things and like having that dynamic of listening to instruction, responding to instruction, practicing, doing the routine, like it's important for kids to do these
Absolutely.
things. So
That
like
and that's important. Like as far as her going to school a year late, I don't think it's gonna affect her academically or intellectually because she's so smart. But the social aspect of her being in gymnastics and having her cousins around, she's gonna do fine.
yeah, yeah. I kind of want to pick your brain too with being like a father in like this generation right now with like does that like the things that you might see on social media, does that ever like make you worry or think about like how you want to raise her and like how you want to like proceed in life like because like when I look at social media, I definitely want to have a family of my own one day, and if I'm ever lucky enough to have kids, it'd be a blessing. But the constant pushback with people who may or may not want kids is like this world is a scary place right now, and like how do you overcome that with like your day-to-day like routine with raising her?
It's all about the values that you're instilling into your child. I mean, like I was saying before with the whole like flexing thing, like I'm not putting my money into trying to look good for people that don't give a fuck about me anymore. Like all my attention is going towards like the things that are important in life, staying active. Like she does gymnastics, we go on hikes, just like getting out into the outdoors, limiting the time on the technology. Uh and then we do every night we have the routine. I think I said this in the last podcast, we try to read books instead of the screen time at night, and I pray with her every night. I grew up religious, and I think it's important just to like people don't know what to turn to nowadays. You have all these videos, one thing's telling you to do one thing, one's telling you to do another thing, and this generation is literally basing their life off of what people are telling them to do. And I think it's really important to every night we pray. And then you have the whole like nightmares and scared of the dark, and like there's some evil out there. Like there's evil out there. And there has to be an opposite of that. So whether people believe in God or not, I do, and I want to instill that into my daughter. And I just think it's important to pray. I think it helps like with the anxiety and everything of just like stupid stuff when you're a kid, like scared of the dark and scared of evil. When you praying every night, it's like God's protecting us. God's got our back. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I really like that you're introducing that to her and like allowing her to kind of experience that because, and I would agree, what we're missing right now in society is faith.
Yeah,
And faith comes in so many different ways, and people get like frustrated with like the word faith because they immediately associate that with like religions. But like you can group spirituality and religion into like the same type of category in the sense that you're believing in something higher than yourself. And for myself, half the reason I'm even like a good person was because I was raised on religious values early on. I appreciated my family for allowing me to make my own decisions when it came to that as I got older. At a pretty young age, we had stuff that happened where losing family members made me question my own beliefs,
of course.
and I was allowed to, luckily, remove myself from the church and stuff like that and make my own decisions. So I don't have like resentment towards the church as some people do.
Right. It just
So
opened up your horizons. You were able to make your own decision.
yeah,
And church
exactly.
isn't for everybody. I think the best part about church is like the fellowship aspect of just being around if your whole family goes to church or just having people that you're seeing every week that are trying to do the right thing. Like I think if church is for you, that's one thing. And if not, you should just like just get in touch with your spiritual side, whether it be going out into nature and doing hikes or whatever it is. Like that is missing, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's like a huge point right there. Is like being out in nature and spirituality and religion arguably can go pretty close to each other. Like there's some type of like experience that if anyone who's ever been on a hike or a trail, when you're in the woods, in the scenery, and you look around, you feel something. Like there's
Definitely.
something there, and I
The
don't
fresh
think.
air.
Yeah,
That's what you feel.
yeah. Especially if you're a city dweller and you're stuck in the cities and
Yeah.
stuff, to like get out of that and like go realize like what true nature really is, and we forget that because we're so locked into our
Yeah.
screens all
Get
the
off the
time.
phone, go out and like anxiety and depression. I don't know what to do. It's like everyone's anxious and depressed. Well, obviously something's missing. And if it is spiritual as in going out into nature, go do that.
Yeah, I would say that too is because it's like that. It's like the physical aspects. There's also some positive from like hiking, being
Of
outside,
course.
is because you get
Get your
fitness.
ass off your couch and go fucking move around a little bit.
Not enough people like really. It's it because a lot. I think a lot of it too is that like I understand the body positivity movement. I think true body positivity relies on like uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Things like missing arms, missing limbs, like
Right.
um certain things like
Certain
with the
things out of
face,
out
like
of your
features.
control.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to talk about.
But you
Is
see the people that have no legs and they're still bench pressing and
mhm,
they've got muscle and like do what you can with what you got.
facts, and that's like kind of the point that I was trying to get to. Is like there's no excuse. Like we all are people. We all have different genetics that are going to make things harder or easier for certain people. It goes back to like talents and stuff like that. Some people are just gonna be more talented than you at certain things, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't work as hard or if not harder than them. Usually it means you have to work harder than them.
Right.
But obviously human beings in general are innately lazy. We look for the easy outlet cuz like hard work is hard. So we don't want to do it, but doing it repeatedly and creating the habit, creating the consistency aspect is so important, and then when you add the whole going outside into nature, getting the good dopamine rushes from being out there, the fresh air, the activity, kind of gets you more into like it opened the door to meditation, to spirituality, and then for some people it could open up to prayer, to getting back into the church, and it all relies back to faith, spirituality, and community. Those three things
Absolutely.
is something that we're really, really missing right now. And like the more that I look around, the more that I see it. And like people don't want to say it, we're missing faith, but when you see a bunch of degenerate behavior all the time on social media, and then that's what's being encouraged, it's sad because what we're really looking at in like the United States and what's becoming a huge issue is like our family units. Like the family
Absolutely.
unit is like one of the core reasons why America was so great for so many years. And obviously we're talking about great in the economy standpoint, good family morals, good family values. We're talking about that. And nowadays it's like clout, it's social media,
Yep.
it's all this other stuff, and like the church is demonized and all these different things, and like I understand why people have contentment for religion because of obviously stuff that's happened in like the past and history, but there are a lot of great things too that we always overlook and we never
Right.
want to talk about. And that's social media in general too, though, is like we always highlight the negative and not the positive. And like that's kind of why a podcast like mine will never really like reach that level, is because I talk about positivity, motivation, I like mental health. That's my lane. I like talking about like organic stuff. But if I talked about the drama, the gossip, all the bullshit, guarantee this would have way more views. And like I don't want to fuel that fire.
And that's good for you. That's like you making a decision based on your morals, which is lacking in society today. Everybody just wants to do the thing that's going to get them views and make them go viral, and it's not getting us anywhere. But I feel like we're at a certain age now where we're starting to learn that. Like, how old are you? 26?
27 right now. I'll be 28 in this upcoming November.
Okay. So, like, for me, right around this age, I'm starting to realize that all that clout and all that shit is like so meaningless, and people don't really give a shit anyway. And you're spending all your time uh, putting it into this. Like, it's like, I think what you're doing is the right thing to do. Like, stick to your morals. And if you're not going to get the views, then fuck it. You're not going to sell your soul.
Yeah, that's kind of the mindset, is like do something that brings me joy.
Yeah.
Like not for my followers, not for a listener, not for a viewer. Like I enjoy this, and like I look at someone, because I think when you first messaged me, you were listening to Rogan and Lex Friedman,
Yep.
and I love those dudes. And
Wow, I
like
was listening to Friedman back then.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not like when we set up this episode.
Oh, yeah.
You hit me
yeah.
up and you
That's
mentioned
right.
that.
Yep. Yeah. Shout out
And
to Lex Friedman.
those
Love that
guys
dude.
like are the reason like I like doing what I'm doing, is because they stick to what they do, and like that got them. Obviously, they had some fame and some notoriety. Jesus Christ, um, before the podcast, so it helps them in the viewership category. But like the base root is like Joe Rogan always talks about, is like the fact that he just enjoys doing the podcast. He talks to people he enjoys talking to, and I took a play out of that playbook. I was like, I mean, if you look at the name, the inspiration, the Carroll connection relates to the Joe Rogan experience. Like
Yep.
there was a huge inspiration there to talk to people in a more genuine way. And how do I make it my own? Talk about mental health, talk about their life, talk about therapy, and use my experiences in therapy, to create a therapy session almost that's somewhat inviting, to allow a little bit of vulnerability. And like that is something that I really was like in touch with at the point in time when I started the podcast, and like I needed that, and like I've created an outlet for myself and an environment for people to kind of just like talk about themselves. Like the fact that you wanted to come back on highlights the fact that I've done something that's worth doing.
Exactly.
So that is something that as you get older, I hit it around like 24ish, where I was like really like creating this podcast, like to hit that like mindset of like, man, I don't want to go out and drink and do this stupid shit no more.
No,
Like,
go out, drink, spend all your money, waste your time. Next day, you have to get up for work. You feel like shit. Like, you got to do things that are good for your future self, even if it sucks in the moment, which is still something that I struggle on. But it's almost like once you get going, starting is the hard part, and then you kind of get that momentum going.
yeah,
It
it's
just turns into a routine.
exactly the routine. You got to build the routine first. And I think what's the saying with habits? It's like so many days to build a habit. I think it's like 30 or something. Could be wrong. It might be 90.
And I try to, you say, like, how do I combat, like, all the things that are going on in society with my daughter? Like, the spirituality thing is one, and then also just, like, the basics, like diet and exercise. I try to eat really healthy with my daughter, and to the point where I'll be like, hey, you want, like, chocolate milk? And she's like, no, I want something healthy. And I'm like, all right, that's good. Like, we're going to run with that. And it shows, because she's just, like, this little innocent thing that's just like happy, and she enjoys life.
I think she'll live a longer life too for building those crucial foundational pieces early on in life. And like obviously someone might not say this to you, but you deserve like credit and like to be able to have that situation where you can be a parent in that situation to raise good values. Like it takes, I think they always say that it takes a village to raise a child. So to have a good community around you and people that support you and her to help instill these things, and to not like always go around like the healthy parenting, because like it is hard to healthily parent your child, to teach things like fitness, to teach things like diet, to teach things like making friends and like doing this social aspect, into reading, to learning different things, to like even just like that small little detail of like preferring something healthy over chocolate milk. So valuable. There's so many years where we were taught as growing up is like milk is good for you. Milk's good for you. Milk's not great for you.
No,
Like we're the
she
only.
doesn't drink milk.
It's not
She
healthy.
drinks almond milk.
Healthier, yeah, yeah. I think it's a better alternative, because like when you think about milk, we're the only. I think we're one of the only creatures, animals on the planet that drink another animal's milk, and we call it healthy.
Yeah,
Like that's.
I don't drink milk myself,
I don't either.
and a big reason is just the steroids and everything that they put in it. I have no idea what's in there, so I just don't buy it. Like we'll have it sometimes if I make like pancakes or something. Like
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
put it in there, but there's chemicals and hormones and stuff like that, and I don't want my daughter being 11 years old with like big boobs and stuff like that. That shouldn't be the case.
Yeah,
And I think that is the case because of like the hormones and everything that they're putting in the food.
that the processed foods, like we can even dive into like the effect of like testosterone like dropping in men like rapidly.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan's highlighted that point, and
That's a huge problem for our society, is like just men not being the men that they used to be, and females taking that role.
yeah, it starts with the guys. To be honest, like if we're if you go back to even like we talk about biblical stuff, like men being the leaders and like the women like following the leadership of the men. Obviously, we've gotten to society where equality is like prided and preferenced, and I think it's a good thing that we all have equal rights and privileges to do what we want to do. But at the same time, I think it is important for us to follow our biological natures, and obviously, if you feel a certain type of way, to act a certain type of way, do that. You have the freedom, especially in America, to do that. But as a guy, like testosterone is a huge aspect into us and our mental health and to our physical health, and like you see that in. I think I always like try to highlight this as like, as someone who advocates for mental health, I think it's also to like highlight the important aspect that mental health is different for men and women, and is different for everybody. Like showing our emotions all the time isn't always healthy, because if you have an extremely emotional man, usually he's a very dangerous man. Look at jail and like prisons. Most of the men in there are very emotional men that acted on their emotion and did something that was horrific, and that's why they're in jail to begin with. Obviously, you got a bunch of different reasons why people are in jail, but for a huge portion of it, lack of families, emotional, unstable men acting out of pure chaos, and
Right.
like
And that just goes back to just not giving into your emotions. I mean, if I always gave into my emotions, I would be eating the worst food, going to bed super late every day. You have to make that decision, like you're doing what you don't want to do right now to set your future self up.
100%. And I think that's a huge part of, it's kind of like a masculine trait, is like to set the boundaries for yourself to do the damn thing. And
Right.
like
Do
you need,
what you need to do, not what you want to do.
huge. And like that is something that I think is good to like to teach the children, but it's also something that I realized as I got older, I had to learn that too. I had to indulge in some of the stupid shit. I had to indulge in all these different things. It's like people might question, did you really have to? For me personally, my own personal experiences, like if I don't have the experience, I can't really like enjoy, or like I don't know how to explain it, really like deal with it.
Right.
Like if you just tell me, hey, I went through this thing, don't do this thing,
You're still gonna do
I'm still
it
gonna
until
do
you
it.
find out for yourself.
Exactly. And I think that's like a huge thing in our culture right now, is people will ignore wisdom and ignore advice, even if it's good advice, more because like they need the own experience to create their own wisdom. And for me, I'm one of those people, unfortunately, where I need the experience to actually like learn from it. Like if I
Right.
don't have the true experience, it's harder for me to learn from something. I mean,
I wish I knew in high school too, like that they really have an agenda to like decentralize families and to take the masculinity out of men. And like the easiest way to combat that is just by doing your push-ups every day as a young man that's in high school, eating healthy, and realizing that this is an actual thing. Like us guys got to step it up a little bit.
we do. We 100% do. And like being true leaders, like doing stuff that actually brings value. And that, like, even when I talk about this podcast, and like I've talked about like the whole manosphere space and like red pill and stuff like that before. And for me, like I do like agree with a lot of the stuff that's put out there, but I also think the one thing that's really missing is the mental health stuff that no one wants to talk about. Like men off themselves at rates that are like insane, like
Right.
compared to anyone else. And we don't talk about this. We just like kind of like it's a part of society, and it's not, because what we don't have is we don't have communities of men that stick up for each other. We don't create safe spaces, and people like, oh, safe spaces. It's like kind of like a woke term, but it's true not to have a space for guys to be guys and
Guys
have that
have
place.
guys have to be around each other. Like, I mean, you see it in like Jewish culture. At the weddings, all the guys are on one side and all the women are on the other side dancing with each other. And you got to have that camaraderie in one way or another way. Whether you're playing flag football with your guys, too many guys are just at home with their girlfriends all the time, and it softens them up. And then we have a whole culture of this, and then the kids, it's the same thing, and it's just a repeated cycle that we have to break.
Yeah, and it goes back, and this is something that I learned early on from like just having a good masculine role model in my life was my dad, and like having him be there and like be tough on me, coach me, be there all that time, and having my mom be in the soft side, being there to support us, to do all the things we needed her to do, and like I
That's
always
the
say,
roles. I mean, the soft side, like you said, a lot of females are trying to be this hard masculine man, and that's because they're doing it for survival.
yeah, it's usually trauma related too. Like it's usually they're put in environments because the men in their life are shitty men, and that's why like I always like to blame the guys first, is because like you should want to step up regardless. Like obviously anyone should step up and be the best version of themselves, of course, but like at the same time you have to, as a guy, you have to show up. If you don't show up, no one's saving you. And that's like something that like I like realized pretty early on is like no one's coming to fucking save me. Like
Nope.
you have to do it yourself. You have to show up. You have to go to the gym. And for me, luckily, I was taught a lot of these things early on. I started really late, like weightlifting in 8th grade. Like playing football got me into like the physical aspect. It was an outlet for me, and like that's why it's important to teach these things as kids to do sports, to like even for your daughter to teach her gymnastics, to get her into like a little bit of fitness and like introduce her at an early age, to teach her multiple languages, to teach her these things. Like teaching our children the stuff that we didn't know is
Right.
so important. Like we had, and we don't blame our parents for these things. They didn't know. They didn't have the internet and technology to like reach behind like mainstream media. Mainstream media sold them alive for many years. And now we have the internet to kind of look at our own sources. And obviously it creates a negative of misinformation. Like that's a whole different
Right.
topic.
And then you have two sources, one person telling you to do one thing, one person telling you to do another thing. Such a stupid example, but I saw a short, and it was like, to be a masculine man, you should walk fast all the time. And then another one's like, you should walk slow all the time. And it's like these young men that are in high school, it's like, what the fuck do I do? Especially if they don't have a masculine role model in their life. So I think it's good to even have this podcast if you have a few people listening, to just realize that there are good male role models out there. And I think there's so much media with good male role models that's going out to the kids now. So I think it's going in a good direction.
Yeah, I hope there's like a realistic change, because I think we were sold a lie. I think both parties, both sides, everyone around was sold a lie that we were supposed to be this one way, when in reality, it's not for everybody. It's not for the majority, to be honest. And like as someone, for myself, that I'm probably a lot more in touch with my emotions than most people, I had to learn how to manage those in a way that's a healthy way to like cope with them. Like for me, therapy was a great way to learn these coping skills, and that's why I talk about that personally. But I would never prescribe or say to everyone should go to therapy. Like it's something that you should try. You should be open to it.
I think it's awesome. It's a good thing because as a man, you have no one and nobody to talk to. Nobody wants to hear about your day at work. Where, especially me as a firefighter, like I'm not gonna go home and tell you all the stuff I did at work because it's depressing, and you don't understand anyway because you don't do it. So to talk to somebody, I think that's huge.
Yeah, and like that's that inspiration from therapy for me. It kind of like shaped this podcast in a way that I never thought it would. Like it became more of like that. Like I've mentioned many times already, is like therapeutic versus a conversation. Like to actually sit down with someone, have a real life conversation, talk about some real shit, and like it's also cool to like give people a platform to like be seen and heard. Like that
Right.
is so undervalued in our society because so
Especially
many
with
people.
social media that just highlights everybody's good things, and we're starting to see that it's just bullshit. So seeing an actual podcast where like you're not set up perfect and not everything looks perfect, you realize that these are actually humans, and we've lost that just conversation skill. Like when I first came to your podcast, it's probably the longest conversation I've had with a person like in a long time. Like besides my family, you know. But I think it's awesome what you're doing.
I appreciate that, and like that's actually like crazy to think about, and I wonder how many people felt that way too after
Even
leaving the
coworkers,
podcast.
I mean, I have small conversations here and there, but like you don't have like an hour and a half long, 2 hour conversation with anybody nowadays
No, and
because we're
like
so
yeah,
on our phones, and it's like we lost such a huge thing. And then I haven't really talked to you since the last podcast.
yeah. That's also not like it's not intentional because I mean I'm a very introverted person.
Yeah,
One,
we
and we
have
live
our
our
lives.
lives. Yeah.
Yeah,
So like, and I'm glad that you're one of those people that actually acknowledges that. Like, I think we've all had people in our lives, our lives, I should say. I mean, that will get frustrated when you don't talk to them a lot, and it's like, especially like you've a kid, like you also have to provide too. Like for me, like I don't have to provide for anyone yet, so it's kind of like I have less of an excuse, but at the same time, it's like I have like the amount of time that I put into this, like takes away from the time that I could socialize with people.
of
So
course.
it's like I don't have time to fucking ask everyone how their day is. I don't have time to catch up with every single person I've had a conversation with. I've done this. This is episode 135. I've talked to a lot of people. I can't reach out to every single
Right.
person.
I appreciate that too because I feel like it's fake a lot of times. You see someone that you haven't seen in years, and now all of a sudden they're asking you, "Oh, how's your kid doing?" You don't give a fuck how my kid's doing, or else you would have hit me up. So it's almost like it's just like this fakeness that's just like infected our society, and this is something real, and people watch it and they enjoy it. Because I had people hit me up about the last podcast, like, "Wow, I took something away from that." Like people that I haven't talked to, and it's like they just like seeing that like human conversation.
Yeah, and I like I love hearing that because like the negative of being the creator is like I don't always hear that from people, the feedback. And like that's what I hope for is people on your side who listen to you talk who might not hear you talk all the time, who might not see you often, get a chance to really hear what you're going through and what you're thinking about. And that's like the coolest thing in the world to me is like I don't care if I get 200, 300, 400 thousands of views. Like I don't
Right.
care. Like
Don't care.
it's about the people around that person. It's your intimate like circle. It's your family. It's your friends. That's who I care about creating this conversation for. And if by the grace of God or the universe or whatever, a video goes viral and I get like a huge following,
It's good. You
dope.
get more exposure.
It doesn't
More
change the
people.
fact of what I'm doing though.
Right.
That's like the whole like process. Even if you go back to my very first introduction, like 10-minute little clip, I think I even led with like, I don't care to talk to celebrities. If I do, cool, but that's not the goal. The goal is to have real conversations with real people. And
That's what matters, especially like people are so fixated on celebrities and like don't support local business. And I think that's another thing that I've been trying to focus on. Another thing going to Montreal, those people support local business hard. And they don't care if you're that good or if your product is that good. They're going to support you just because you're in the community. And that's the only way to build your community.
I would agree. Yeah, I think it's giving
So,
back into that environment. And like, that's what I would say. Like, if you want to really make change, you start with your community and the people around you. Because like, if you go for like immediately trying to affect change in the nations and the countries and like,
you're
you're not
not
going
even
to do it.
affecting your neighbor. So, how are you supposed to change the world? Like,
Mm.
so the way I see it is like, instead of going to Starbucks, go to the local coffee shop, and that's what I try to like support local business, especially with this new business idea that I had with the juice, which I would like to talk about real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
So that whole idea with Lemon Drop is the name of my juice company. I had this idea. My daughter was really sick. She had croup, and she had like this really dry cough, and it really only started at night. And it was frustrating because we're both trying to sleep and she's just hacking away. Any parent knows that when your kid's sick, it's like miserable. So we tried all kinds of different things. We went to her pediatrician. She gave us some recommendations. and I gave her like this organic cough medicine. I did the humidifiers. I did like the Vicks. I did all this stuff, and she was still coughing. And I was just like desperate at this point. And my family's always been into like holistic remedies and everything. So I just threw this little thing together for her. I had these little red shot cups, like the solo cups, but they're shots. And I put squeezed lemon juice because I know that's good for you. I had a lemon, and I did honey, and then I did some like ginger powder, and I mixed it up. And she was literally laying in bed, coughing, like crying now because she couldn't sleep. We hadn't slept the night before. She took the shot. Honest to God, she stopped coughing for the rest of the night. So I had like this idea. I'm like, let's do like a juice bar, like not shots as in like alcohol, no alcohol. And I had this idea for a physical brick and mortar juice shop where you go and you get your juice pressed and it's healthy. And I think a lot of people would like doing it, especially with my father, who's a recovering alcoholic. I don't want to sell alcohol. Like I kind of want to like get that out of my life altogether and have somewhere where my family can go and not have temptations and everything. So that's what I had. And just starting my own business, it's like that local business aspect is super important. And a lot of other communities value it. And here it's like you'll just go to Starbucks and instead of supporting your local business. And that's why I think like would help us flourish.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that is definitely something to continue pouring time into is doing stuff like that. And for me, it's like about local stuff. Like I talk to people all locally. Like I really don't talk to people not within the area. And I've outreach to different communities, but it's always because someone heard of it. And like that's how real change starts. It's like you
Right.
start with the
Word of
community.
mouth.
Exactly. True word of mouth. Like we've gotten away from that and it's like all social media. But
But it takes the consumer to realize that you're doing like a bigger cause. Like even if you like the Starbucks a little bit better, go to the coffee shop and like just support that local business, and it's gonna help our community flourish, and then eventually it's gonna help everything flourish.
yeah, yeah. And we are definitely obviously getting towards later parts in the podcast, but I do want to give you the chance. I know I forgot to kind of like I was gonna plug it in earlier, but I know you want to talk about a little bit about your grandfather too.
Absolutely.
And we didn't get to cover as much as you would like on the last podcast. And I was gonna insert it earlier, but we obviously were just having a great conversation. But I wanted to allow you to kind of talk about that.
So my grandfather is 80 years old. He's not on many medications. He wakes up every day. He has his routine. He's like your old school like hard ass guy, like man. And that's awesome to live around and because I live with them. So I see that and I'm extremely thankful and grateful for him. That's what I kind of didn't say in the last podcast. But just having that wisdom, I think definitely helps me make better decisions to always have like that word of wisdom like and even like you said like it kind of takes you to experience it to learn from it rather than somebody telling you. So he'll tell me all the time like, oh, you're going out kind of late, you got work in the morning, and I still go out and I'm like, fuck, like he's smart and he's like the kind of man that we need in this society today to get your ass up out of bed even if you don't feel like it. Go out for breakfast, have that community aspect, go get shit done during the day, go to bed early, like work hard during the day. Like he's always kind of like doing projects around the house and everything. It keeps him young. You see people that are like 50 years younger than him that seem like they're older than him. So I think that's really important. Um,
I would say, yeah, traditional masculinity.
yeah,
That's really what it is. And like I think that aspect is really missing from society, that whole just get up and do it. And I definitely pushed back on that for a long period of time in my life. And then I went through my own emotional distress period and while doing the podcast, so it's all kind of recorded. And I went through a whole feel your feelings thing, and it became more of a feel your feelings, but fuck your feelings. It was feel my feelings. And that's not healthy either. So I had to kind of be on this pendulum swing where growing up, it was always man up, which if it's all just man up 24/7, that's toxic. It's not healthy because not everyone is traditionally masculine all the fucking time. And it's tiring to be that way, to be completely honest with you. But also being completely emotional, always in your emotions, crying at everything, being frustrated, being angry, being mad at the world does nothing either. So for me, going through that like pendulum swing and feeling both sides, I kind of really came to that perfect like spot where I'm like, oh, I understand the whole aspect of like yin and yang, like the opposite, like the whole opposite, the masculine, the feminine. These things work together in a way that creates humans, and you need both. Like human beings in general are a spectrum of masculinity and femininity. Where you fall on that is kind of up to you, but I think it's important to understand both.
Right.
Because if you're a guy and you only understand masculinity, you're gonna really fail when it comes to relationships and understanding your partner. When I'm talking about heterosexual relationships, and for women, if you only understand the female perspective, you're never gonna truly understand what men really like and what men really are, and that's what really creates the contempt for both parties. Is because both parties don't understand each other. And if you actually take yourself out of your own shoes and can understand the other side and how to understand how to incorporate some of these different masculine traits and different feminine traits into your person, obviously take what's better for you as a person and what works for your personality. But if you take both sides, it's going to create a way more balanced person and a way more logical and like emotionally sound person, because you need to be able to stand up and lead at times. And sometimes you also need to be vulnerable and show that you're a human too. And I think for guys, if they could truly understand that, because obviously I'm a man, I will speak to men more than I would speak to for women. But as men, I think we really do need to understand what it takes to be a man, but what also our emotions are like. Because if you ignore one side or the other, it just creates a chaotic, toxic
Right. You
environment.
need a balance. And I think females need to realize, I feel like there's been a lot of respect lost for men with females nowadays, where they don't realize that we have a whole different chemistry, that we're supposed to be doing shit that we don't want to do, going, working hard, providing for our families. And I mean, if you look around, men have solely built a lot of our infrastructure in our world. And I feel like women don't have some women don't have like even knowledge or respect for that. Like, how many times you see like fuck men, like independent, this that, to the point where like some of my little cousins are like 7-year-old girl like doing a dance talking about like men aren't this and men aren't that, and I have to explain to her like, a man built this house that you're living in. Like, you have to realize that, like, both parties are needed in society. But for women to say, fuck men, or men vice versa, like, we have to come come to a balance within ourselves and learn to just do our role, let the other do their role, and work together.
Yeah, it's getting back to like respecting each other. Like we don't respect each other, and it's in our culture. And we're not when we talk about these things for people who listen. We're talking obviously in generalities, and like you look at culture, it's all over the place. Like it's and part of that narrative of like men ain't shit, fuck all men, is part of the reason men are so depressed and like struggling and suffering, because when you're telling us from an early age we ain't shit and we're this and we're that, like think about how you were as a child and how easily you were imprinted on. I mean, for example, just what you just said, culture and music, and you got your cousins like young age is saying this shit. Flip that. You have a young boy listening to music or watching videos on social media of girls, yada yada, men ain't this, men ain't that.
Right.
And they're gonna take that into heart. And it's gonna go one way or the other. They're gonna grow um, to be angry at them, or they're gonna become very emotionally unsound humans that are depressed and don't want to go outside and do things. And both are very bad outcomes of that. So I think we have to do a better job at raising our young boys, and
Absolutely.
getting back to teaching them there's consequences to your actions. You need to step up. You need to be more accountable. And like obviously you can teach that to your daughters as well, but you're seeing the lack of masculinity, like the ripple effects of that in our society today. And it's getting very scary out there for a lot of people. And I hope that we're correcting the course. And I think life's kind of like a pendulum. It swings back and forth both ways. And for a while, we were swinging very one way, and I think we're starting to swing back a little bit the other way. And once we kind of can get more closer towards that middle, that sweet space, I think it would be better for everyone. But we'll see. And obviously, we're getting like towards the end of the podcast, so I want to start wrapping things up and tying things together. I kind of want to give you the kind of like your last thoughts and give you kind of like the time to take as much time as you need to go into whatever you want to say. So I'll let you kind of take the floor, and then I'll do my closing stuff.
Okay. So money, energy, attention, and time. Meat. It's like the meat of life. That's what we have, especially as young men. That's our whole entire life. So that's your biggest currency. I mean, what are you spending all these things on? It becomes what your life is. And for the young men out there that are kind of don't have any purpose, and now they find a girl that's interested in them, you're spending all your money, energy, attention, and time on this thing. And like, you have to be careful what you do with that. And I think you should uh, I think it comes down to being disciplined and doing, like I said, the thing that needs to be done rather than the thing that you want to do. I think that wraps it up right there.
Perfect. I think I totally agree with that. I think a lot of guys will give everything that they have away in the pursuit of just being loved. It's really what it comes down to. Is a lot of guys want to give up everything they have to be seen, to be loved. And obviously, you can go into desires and stuff like that because that's a whole different topic we can get into about that industry. But
if you put your money, energy, attention, and time into yourself, the right one is gonna come along. And rather than putting all your money, energy, attention, and time into a female to make her like you, she's gonna end up breaking up with you because you don't respect yourself. You're spending money like an idiot. And then energy, attention, and time. Like, don't stay out late if you have work the next day just to be out partying with the girl that's gonna dump you anyway. Then you feel like shit, and now you're late to work. And focus on yourself, kings.
you heard it here first, boys. For people that do listen, is to take away that aspect is like, especially the guys. Like, I know there's not a lot of spaces where guys can be just guys and be respected. It's very criticized still right now. So I mean, I hope that people can take away some things from the conversation. Is like a lot of things that guys talk about, we talk about in private. We don't say publicly. So I hope people can really understand that we are different. Like, that doesn't mean we're not equal, but we are different. Like, we can all have equal access to water, to food, to the education, to work, to pursuit of happiness. Like,
If I'm walking down the street with my girl and somebody tries to jump us, she's gonna look at me to protect her.
as it should be though, because like,
So
you're the
when
man.
you're saying, guys ain't shit and this and that, well, we are shit when the time needs to be done. So I think we just need to have more respect for each other.
What's the saying is good times create weak men, tough times create strong men, and it's like this, like the whole cycle to it basically. So obviously we're in the time where things are pretty good, so we're not required to be strong men, and we're seeing that in society. And I think unfortunately we might start seeing that tip the other way, which is good to bring back strong men. But obviously with like bringing back strong men means times are going to get pretty bad, so hopefully times don't get awful where we all struggle. But we'll see how the life goes. But I just want to say this has been a great conversation with you. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I appreciate you reaching out and wanting to come back on the podcast, because that also validates the fact that I'm doing something that people enjoy being a part of. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate you for coming on the podcast.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Of course, for you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your grandma. You can check it out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, you can search it on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection, or at Jared M. Carroll. It should pop up right for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection, or text, snap, however you want to contact me. And until next time, guys, peace.